So we have a new secretary tonight.
Councillor Richard Organ, Councillor Alan Chandler, Councillor Bob Patchett and Councillor Colin Poole.
There's only one more missing, he'll probably turn up. Members' interest. Disclosure of interest. Councillor.
Yeah, application 1261. I'll leave the room for that. I'm a family member involved with Daventry.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Longley.
Yeah, it's the East Haddon application. I'm the live in the farm next door to it.
Yeah.
And
I thought you might say that. Yeah.
Parish Councillor for West Haddon. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Party grouping arrangements. Right, members of the public, that means we don't get together beforehand and decide how we're going to vote and vote together on party lines. A few bits of housekeeping, which I'm sure those who've been before have heard it all, but if you heard the alarm go, it's not it's the real thing, it's not a test, so please go out as quickly as you can and as orderly as you can the way you came in. Please switch your mobile phones to silent. If it makes a noise, we charge you £5 towards the chairman's charity. If it makes a horrible noise, it's £10. The proceedings are being recorded. Speakers will have 3 minutes and then you'll hear a tone and be asked to wind up. And that is the only opportunity for you to speak. So please, I'm sure you won't interrupt anyway. And the next one, you're not going to hear cheer, boo, clap, wave your arms or jump around, are you? No, you don't look like that. You'll see officers talking during the same time as perhaps you're talking, which looks incredibly bad manners. They're trying to find the answers for the points you're making during your speech so that the meeting flows. Update on performance, that comes to you naturally by emails. Okay? I think that's all the... There are no applications withdrawn or delegated. So we go straight to the first application, which is in Stratton 0274.
Thank you, Chairman. Site within the village confines or the settlement boundary in Stratton. So you'll be aware now that since we published our draft local plan, we're now saying under policy R1 that it does allow for infilling within village confines. So the principle is effectively acceptable under that policy, under our revised interpretation. The proposal is actually to build a new house at the side, demolish a garage, sorry, and build a new house at the side of the existing property, which sits on the side of the A5199 as you see there. Although it actually looks quite a tight site, it is actually feasible to do this as you see on the layout plan. There have obviously been concerns from parish council and neighbours of area about character, parking and effect on amenity. You'll see it all set out there anyway. I'll see there are speakers, keep it brief on that point. But I think the main thing to point out is that there has been a subject of quite a few discussions to try and design a house that's in keeping with the house adjacent. And I think just to show on the photos, if you look opposite, that is looking opposite the site, you'll see there's been a very large extension allowed on that house opposite, although it was some years ago, to create 2 semi-detached dwellings. And that goes right up pretty well to the A5199 boundary. And as you'll see in this case, the house has been designed to have the appearance at the front, certainly similar to those adjacent to the property, where they have sloping roofs coming down with dormer windows that effectively look like dormer bungalows. That's what's there now. So anyway, so it has been revisited effectively to try and there we go. That's it, showing how it sits next to the existing house. It has been amended to try and fit in with the existing street scene. Although as you see there, it will be 2-storey at the rear. Anyway, the principle of the thing is okay as far as we're concerned. The other thing to point out on the layout plan is there have been a lot of concerns about parking. At the end of the cul-de-sac, all those 4 properties, or the 3 properties and the proposed property would all be owned by the same owner. So the intention is now to turn this area into a large parking area. You layout plan, it does provide for 9 car parking spaces, whereas the actual requirement would be 2 per dwelling times 4 is obviously 8, so they have got 1 spare over the 8. They would have to normally provide at the rate of 2 per dwelling, which is in accordance with the neighbourhood plan as well. County Council have made some comments about they want a swept path analysis, but I think our view is that we're happy that those parking spaces will be adequate and people will be able to get in and out of them without too much of a problem before they go back onto the public highway. So on that basis, we feel it is in accordance with policy and it does comply with standards. It isn't an overdevelopment of the site, it won't have an adverse impact. The only other condition we were going to suggest on that point was that we have a condition on to say there should be obscure glazing in the bathroom window. It doesn't actually say there won't be, but I think we ought to just make it clear that to deal with any potential overlooking from that side, that the small bathroom window is going to be obscure glazed, so that would be an additional condition. And with that, Chairman, we recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. We have 2 speakers. First of all, Mrs Wilkes from the Parish Council.
Good evening. And as advised, I'm the chairperson of the Stratford Parish Council Planning Committee. I'm here obviously to represent the Parish Council, and over the last year, 18 months, we've considered this application in detail on numerous occasions, and throughout that time, with each amendment, we've looked at it, revisited it, and every time we came to the same conclusion that this development is not appropriate to the site. Stratton, as you are no doubt aware, does have a neighbourhood plan, and as advised under policy HS2, this allows for infill development, but that's only subject to certain criteria, which in the report that I've read from the planning officer, she fails to mention those criteria. The building should reflect the character of surrounding properties. All properties are semi-detached dormer-style properties. This is not semi-detached. Further, the house opposite, which you were shown in the photo, that was built quite a long time, and my understanding, although I could be incorrect, is actually it's not a semi-detached house, it's a flat and a house. The fact that that got planning permission shouldn't set precedent for today's proposed development. In our opinion, and in the opinion of all the councillors on the Stratton Parish Council, development would lead to cramming, and that is contrary to our neighbourhood plan. The site is squeezed into the corner of the cul-de-sac. There it looks quite spacious, but if you come up Willow Close, it really is quite a tight entrance. And my opinion, and that of the council, is that it would lead to further on-street parking. 10 Willow Close will, under the proposed development, lose its garage, and the residents there will be required to park on their front garden to create a second required space. Parking on the garden is obviously unsightly and creates the appearance of cramming, and is probably, although probably not relevant to yourselves, breach of the original builder's covenants. By nature of the location of the plot, further on-street parking is inevitable. Development intends to provide 9 parking spaces for 4 properties. However, the location of those parking will create a car park appearance, not very pleasant for the existing residents and the amenity of their residential properties. The planning officer in her report does state there's only been 4 letters of objections. I believe there are only about 15 properties in Willow Close, and as the planning officer has said, 4 to 5 of those are actually owned by the applicant. There have been 4 objections, that's 50% of the residents in the immediate locality. Finally, to dismiss the highways proposals for a swept path analysis, I feel is incorrect. The planning officers may not feel this is important, but we do feel that the highways it is important and are made as safe a place as possible, and we do therefore feel any recommendation by them should be undertaken and not ignored. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr Brent, who is the applicant. Mr Brent.
Good evening. I'm sorry that there's issues with the Parish Council, but we've worked very closely with Daventry, and I'd like to thank the case officer for her first-class job. At this stage, we do have complete adequate parking in our opinion, and the character and the way it fits, if you went right back up to number 1, the actual building lines and things are all in line with the housing in industry that's existing. And I think number 2 coming back this way, they've added to that line as well. So we're just complementing the whole aspect. The view from the main road with the not dormer at the rear will actually tidy up all the various different extensions and shapes on the back of that housing area. So in my opinion, I'd like to thank the case officer, and I'm nothing to add at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Local member is Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm just looking at something. Well, where do we go from here? I feel that I should support the parish council. I think that this is an overdevelopment of the site. I think it creates an unsightly precedent from Main Road, which is quite a sight as you drive along. You'll notice that there was a post and wire fence there that used to be a very nice hedge, which was shown up in the other pictures until I guess the applicant chopped it down. And therefore I find this development is contrary to policy R1 and the subsequent parts of it, which is 1 to 5, because it doesn't result in an environmental improvement, because the environmental improvement was only created by the hedge being cut down in the first place. It isn't required to support or retain local services. It's not been informed by an effective community involvement exercise except through a planning application, and it's not any of 4 or 5. Also, it does talk about in the NPPF about high quality design and development, and I don't consider this to be very high quality design wise, though you could possibly say that about the whole of Willow Close, I guess. So I'm just trying to find something, so excuse me while I fertle about in my papers. But what's quite interesting, here it is that there is another application for Spratton later on, and it says in the officer's notes, this particular one appears to be outside the village confines, and no new dwellings are required in the village, let alone outside the village in that particular instance. So we seem to have a conflict of policies here, where the officer is arguing on the same policy both ways, depending on which application you're looking at. Either they do need houses or they don't, and if they don't, then that means that this application should be refused. I think I'd actually like to suggest that we refuse this application based on the basis of the Spratton Neighbourhood Plan, and that the 5-year land supply is, there is no more need for housing in the village, as the officers already state in the application further on, and that it creates an unsightly parking scene at the end of that very tight cul-de-sac. So I would like to suggest that we refuse this application.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Not. Oh, you do now. Would you like to speak now, Councillor? Or you can reserve your right to later.
Can I reserve my right? I mean, there are some things that I'm not entirely happy about.
Okay, you can speak later.
Thank you.
If I forget, just remind me. Right. Other comments, please. Did you want to answer any of those points, please?
Well, it's difficult to have a debate on this, Chairman. I'll obviously discuss the next application that's going to come along. But as I said at the beginning, the site in this instance is within the existing confines of the village, and it's also within the settlement boundary as defined in the Spratton Neighbourhood Plan, whereas the site we're going to be talking about shortly is, in our opinion, outside the confines of the village and outside the settlement boundary of the neighbourhood plan. So I would say that's the essential difference between the two applications. And I think the officer was speaking in the context of were there any special circumstances for the application to come, what they say, we'll obviously discuss that when we get there, Chair.
Do you want to elaborate on R1?
Well, as I said before, we've now taken a view on R1 where I think we're saying it doesn't debar all development in the rural area, but you still have to have regard to the criteria, which have also been mentioned by Councillor Frenchman in policy R1, but we're not saying now it rules out any more development in the rural area, provided it meets the criteria. And I guess that's obviously a judgment, and you've still got policy HS22 as well that have similar criteria in, and that's a judgment you have to make, as well as the policies in the neighbourhood plan. I think the officers and the case officer is saying she's been through all the relevant policies, and in her view it complies with all the relevant policies. But obviously you can take a different view, I guess.
Thank you, Jim. Right. Councillor Owen-Swift.
Yes, Councillor Frenchman said that the clause is architecturally not a beauty contest, and it's very difficult to see what is the harm, because if it will go in here, what is the harm to put a house at that point? Is the harm overriding the benefit? And this is the evidence I have in front of me. I think another building, I am minded to go with officer advice on that, for that house. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen-Swift. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll go along with the last comments really. I know it's not 100% with me this one. It's I think it's quite close, and there's debate to be had. And I think there is a certain amount of merit in the comments about whether the car parking will work. It's quite difficult to see it, and I think there's a recommendation that there's a sweat analysis on it. And I think as this is contentious and it does need to work, I think that should actually be adhered to, and I think we should consider that they do actually look at that and prove that the car parking facility is adequate for this development. And if it's not, then something else has to be done around that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say basically that I'm always impressed with villages that have a local plan, and this has, and we must therefore listen to what the parish councils have to say about it, or the local plan has to say about it. And they're obviously firmly not in favour of this particular development. However, are there reasons strong enough to go against officer advice? And frankly, I don't think they are. I think it's a matter of subjectivity here, and I believe that there is room.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Ritchie.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I mean, obviously I have been concerned about the parking, but it's not just the parking. If we go back to the last photograph that was on of the area, no, there was one that sort of showed the end. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, there remains an element of openness and greenery about that. I feel that we have got village plans so that villages don't simply get built over every place where there is a spot that people feel they could put in extra property. And I just feel that that this is one of these situations. If the parish council feel that this is overdevelopment, if they feel that this is going to detract from the general ambience of the place, it may not be a bit of Stratton that there's terribly much ambience that goes about it. But nevertheless, I just feel that it's not necessary, and therefore I'm inclined to opt for refusing this application.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. If there is no more comments, we have a proposal that's been seconded that the application be refused for the given reasons. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the application isn't refused. I need another proposition now, don't I? Councillor Owen Swift?
I propose to go with officer advice, but with the adding of the frosted window. Please.
Thank you.
Can we have the path analysis?
If I
Two hands went of
If I
identical.
could just come back on that,
Councillor
Chairman.
Wesley, I'll take
If you go back to the layout plan, I mean, basically, there's the dimension on that drawing that's showing 7 metres from the back of the car parking space. Clearly, there's more than 7 metres across the back of all those car parking spaces, which is all you normally do to reverse out of the car parking space and turn. So I think basically we just think county council are really asking for something that you don't need, and I can't really see why they're asking for that when it's quite obvious based on their own dimensions. You can drive into those car parking spaces and reverse out, turn the car around in that area and drive out.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
Chair, I would just like to say that I'd like to second Councillor Owen Swift's proposition.
Well, I've taken it. Thank you for doing so, but 2 more people put their hands up just before.
I thought you'd asking the question.
Yeah.
Be quicker than that.
Would you like to speak on it, Councillor Wesley?
No, I just, as I say, I mean, it's contentious. Somebody's asking to do something, it goes against the parish council's wishes. For me, it's not 100%. I'm not overly enamoured with it, but I think on the balance it's there, and I just think we should do the right thing by the parish council. That's my contention on that, and I understand what the officers are saying, but sometimes things are slightly different when you actually get down to the actual groundwork and the layout and how it actually works. And I'd just like to see the plan with everything in place with that analysis. But if other members don't agree, then so be it.
Okay. We have a proposal on the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. 5. Those against? The application is approved. Next application is in East Haddons Parish, the number is 0859.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for an agricultural building. Normally, things such as this will be permitted development, and we would just be dealing with it under the prior approval procedure, and normally wouldn't effectively require plan permission as such, or even come to plan committee. The reason this has had to have plan permission is because it's within 400 metres of what's called a protected building, which is a residential property that's not a farmhouse. So on that basis, it does require planning permission because it's going to be used for livestock as part of the sheep enterprise. So that's why it's before you. You can see from the actual site plan, it's quite a long way away from the road. And you'll see the agricultural consultant initially had some reservations about that, but has now said he's okay with it. It also sits, as we'll show you from the photos, in a natural dip in the landscape, and it's also set against the background of a copse. So our view is there will be minimal visual impact. There's one, I think, is the next one down, where you can see there's like a little ridge in the field, and it's kind of sitting down below the ridge. There you go, sort of sitting down in that area, and that's taken from the road. So we don't think it's going to have, you see the land drops off quite steeply. We don't think it's going to have a significant visual impact in the area or harm the special landscape area, which is obviously contrary to the view expressed by East Haddon Parish Council, although I know Longborough Parish Council didn't have a problem with it. So consequently, we've recommended approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. We have a speaker, Mr. Hammond, who's the agent.
Thank you as always for allowing me the opportunity to speak. On Roy Hammond, I speak on behalf of the applicant. Obviously welcome the recommendation for approval. We have worked hard to address the concerns raised at the time of the previous application, and we've held a pre-application meeting with the previous case officer. Just to address a couple of matters in the report by way of clarification. The site is contiguous with the wider farm. I think The officer says that it doesn't appear to be, but it definitely is. And whilst there's no intention to construct a track to the barn, and that's principally due to cost and topography, but I note the concerns about the special landscape area as well. And we don't intend to dedicate particular access onto the A428 to serve it. There nevertheless are established entrances to the farm from the A428 itself, which are in regular use. With regard to proposed condition 4, we have no objection to the use of the barn being limited to agriculture in connection with the adjoining land, but believe that tying it specifically to Covert Farm itself is too restrictive and does not allow for flexibility in the future. Limiting the use to agriculture in association with the adjoining land is enough on its own to address any concerns about the access. We believe it isn't necessary to tie it specifically to Covert Farm. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do you want to comment on that? Okay.
I didn't realise Mr Hammond was going to say that actually, but having looked at the reason, it's obviously as was outlined in an email from Mr Hammond, and it's on the basis that there's no access track as such to the building, so we're saying it's only really suitable to be used as part of that farm. I think it's arguable whether the condition is reasonable or not. We obviously think it is, but obviously they have an option to appeal against that condition or to apply separately to get it removed if you do put it on, and appeal against the refusal of either that application or leaving it on this application. So I think on balance, given the reasons that's put there, that that's what they said they were going to use it for, and the fact that we're saying it's because there is no actual separate access track to it, that on balance probably is acceptable and is reasonable, meets the tests, because that's obviously, as you know, what we've got to do. Does it meet the tests to have it on there on that basis? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Local member, there isn't one here. I'm an adjoining one because it's long but me. I don't have a problem with it. A428, as all members know, is elevated and it's hilly both sides, so it would be well hidden from just about everybody. So, as a neighbouring parish, a neighbouring ward, I certainly don't have a problem with it. Councillor Fletcher?
Thank you. I'm not sure that I do either, but a couple of questions actually of the officers. I'm interested to why the agricultural consultant has so comprehensively changed his mind.
Presumably because he spoke to their agricultural consultants and they speak the same language, and they spoke to each other, and then they agreed when they explained how it was going to be used. They agreed. I mean, it wasn't a conversation I was party to, but I'm assuming that's what happened. That's normally what would happen in some circumstances where we'd say, well, your expert talk to their experts and see if you can agree between you. Presumably that's what happened.
It would be useful in future to have some sort of evidence as to why he's changed his mind. And secondly, there's no track to this barn, but they're going to use it, so one assumes that will create a track to that barn, because they're also going to put machinery in it, so they've got to have access for, I presume, a tractor to get there. So continual uses will create a track to that barn, whether we agree with one being formed or not. And that is going to start making a precedent, I would believe, for future farm tracks to be made more permanent and possibly access onto the road from there. I don't know what the officers think about that.
Well, they need access, they need planning permission to get access onto the road because it's a classified road. Any works within 25 metres of the highway also would require planning permission if they're putting out a particle track down. But otherwise, yeah, they've got permitted development rights to do various things within the field, put some hardcore down on the track or whatever, and they probably don't need planning permission to do that. But once they start getting new entrances onto the classified road, that would definitely need planning permission. They can't just do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Wesley first.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it. I just understand what Councillor Frenchman said about the track, but it's fine if they drive in their kit across it. Yeah, they can drive it backwards and forwards anyway, be there a shed there or not. So it's a little bit whatever. What happens in the future is another matter. I propose that we accept officer's advice on this.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder for a start? Councillor Irving Swift.
Except officer.
Do you wish to speak, Councillor Irving Swift, or not?
Yes, I was interested of what Mr. Surfield said. I think it's very important that we keep the farm aspect in the condition. And I've heard what the applicant or the agent of the applicant said, and I think that will set a precedent, and I will not be very pleased with that. So the building shall only be used for agricultural purposes. That I agree totally. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, can I just point out, could you go back to the map? Right, that'll be fine. 2 points here. First of all, that complex you see at the top is where I live, so I must point that out here. So I'm very close to it. But if you see the field just to the north of it, there is actually that's the one. There is actually access to the road at that point with a new gate that's been put in fairly recently. There was always has been access to the road at that point. Second question is, as I am so close to living there, do I get to vote on this or not?
Through you, Chairman.
Anybody want to give me a clue?
We'll ask our legal man. What do you think, legal man?
Well, I don't know.
That's where our council lives. That's the applicant. Does it prejudice your opinion?
I mean, I usually practice, through you, Chairman, I
Well,
look
think
at
about that
practice. If you had declared what you felt was a prejudicial interest, then the process would have been to leave the room. So I would suggest that that horse is probably bolted, given that you've listened to the discussion.
Yes, quite.
Here,
Yeah.
that's a matter.
I'll not vote on the subject in that case. It's probably the best option, isn't it?
I would have thought, knowing where you lived, and
Yeah.
I've been down your drive,
Yeah.
knowing where this is in the field, I wouldn't have thought you had, but I don't want to be the one that gets into trouble. But I wouldn't have thought that affected you at all from that.
I mean, through you, Chairman, it's ultimately the council's decision.
It's
Sorry,
up
it's the
to you.
council that's also, it's not just the individual member, it's whether the
No, I'm asking
council's
advice. Yeah,
decision is in
yeah,
question.
yeah. I'll abstain on this one.
Okay. Yes, sir. Councillor Ritchie.
This question is more out of curiosity rather than about my views on the application. Why on earth would somebody want to put up a barn that doesn't have a track going to it and seems to be quite far away from anything else? Why is it being put in this particular site?
Well, I don't think they have to give a reason.
Well, because, that's the application that's before us now. There was an application previously to build it nearer to the road, which wasn't pursued. And it was a discussion, as I say, has obviously taken place between the case officer and the various agricultural consultants and no doubt the agent from the inside. And this has been agreed as the best place for it, all things considered. Obviously, as I say, I wasn't party to those discussions between the agricultural consultants. But I think we've got to satisfy ourselves that if we've got our agricultural consultant saying, I'm now happy with the siting of these, that we should actually probably take that advice, really.
Okay. Right, we have a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Those against?
Well, that must have been 7, I think, because there weren't 9 councillors there.
Yeah, but one.
Just an extension.
Yeah, but 8 plus 1 plus 1 is 10, not 9.
Problem.
So I think we need to
I'm going around that thing.
remind that again.
Can we count again? Those in favour of the application being approved, please show again. Put your hand up clearly.
4, 5, 6, 7. That's clear.
Thank you, councillor. Like that.
Hello.
So it's 7, 1. Okay. The application is approved then. The next application is in Stratton, it is a 0968.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. When the site plan appears, I was going to say, I think members will be familiar with this, because I think this came to a previous committee, but I wasn't actually present at that previous committee, where there was a proposal to build a dwelling on this site, but further to the south. And that application was refused, and I think there was some suggestion from members that if it was brought nearer to the village, that might be a better option, and obviously they've gone away and that's what they've done. However, from the policy point of view and from the officer's point of view, nothing has changed. As we said previously, as we say now, the site does lie beyond the existing confines of the village. Based on that definition, it also lies beyond the settlement boundary in the Stratton neighbourhood plan. So therefore we say it's in open countryside, and the question that was being alluded to earlier was, why do we say there's no justification then? The reason is really because obviously where we go to an open countryside situation, under our other planning policies and under the MPPF, obviously they have to have some specific vocational requirements, if you like, i.e. an agricultural dwelling or similar, to justify building in the open countryside, and that isn't the case that's been put forward here. So really that's why we're saying, well, there doesn't seem to be any special need for this. So we just fall back on policies for effectively building in a rural area, where we say, well, if it's outside the village confines and outside the settlement boundary and an open countryside, we don't normally allow new dwellings. So that's the background to it. As I say, the design of it has been altered. It does look like agricultural sheds. It is nearer to the village, as was suggested, but it's still the wrong side of the line as far as we're concerned, so it's still contrary to policy. And there's also obviously concerns from the Highway Authority about the number of dwellings using the private track to get to the site has already exceeded 5. So on that basis, Chairman, we're recommending refusal once more.
Thank you, Keith. We have 2 speakers. First of all, Mrs. Welch from the Parish Council.
Good evening again. Since the original application, Stratton Parish Council has supported this application. The Stratton Neighbourhood Plan, Policy SB1, provides that development proposals would be supported if they're sited immediately adjacent to the village settlement boundary, which this property is. So, in our view, it does comply with the other criteria, being Policy SB1, HS1, LD1 and LD3, all of which are recited in your notes from the planning officer. So the planning officer's assertion that this development is in open countryside, we disagree with. It is immediately adjacent to the village settlement boundary, and on that basis it is acceptable to parish council. Further, the site is accessed via an unadopted road known as the Walk. This lane currently serves 12 properties, according to one resident's letter that I read. The local highways authority recommend that the number of properties served by unadopted road is 5. This is only a recommendation, and clearly it's already been exceeded. Further, the applicant already enjoys a right of access over that road to access the greenhouses and buildings that are currently on site. So this isn't an additional resident, this is an existing resident continuing to use the access. So we have the opinion that that is an inappropriate comment. The proposed development is on the site of an existing building which is currently subjected to vandalism. This situation will only continue whilst the property remains unoccupied. If permission is granted, the vandalism hopefully would cease, and which would be the benefit to not only the property owner but also the surrounding neighbours. And so I would urge you to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hayter, the applicant.
Well, much of what the speakers just said is probably most of my notes here actually. But just a little bit. Over the past few years, we've tried to put together a proposal that we allow an on-site dwelling, acknowledging the development rules along the way. On the subject of access, we've used the Walk and Homely Road approach for approximately 50 years. My father bought the land in 1965. If anything, traffic will be reduced without the need of visit daily. Our intentions are only to progress the nursery in a specialist category with no need to expand, just replace the old greenhouses. The proposed dwelling will take place in the existing buildings. It's not open countryside and literally backs onto the brambles, as mentioned. The old buildings have been there approximately 50 years. We have an excellent relationship with our immediate neighbours, trim each other's hedges. We noted that the reference to the conditions of the greenhouses, they still produce some of the finest blooms for our hobby, well, of growing chrysanthemums in 2017. Whatever the outcome today, we intend to carry on producing blooms to a national standard. And hopefully our future plans for hybridisation to create new varieties will happen. We could name the first one Stratton. It would be so much easier and make sense if we could operate a hands-on nursery rather than the daily commute. Just to clarify, as part of the application we will provide a turning head which will be a considerable benefit to all service delivery and visitors to the walk and the neighbourhood.
Thank you, sir. Local member, Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've heard most of the arguments, but I will summarise them. The highways objection is one that we only pay relative lip service to, as we have in other developments. But this nursery has been operating on and off over many years, and so they've been using that access even if nobody's actually lived there, but they've been visiting the site on a regular basis. So I can't see that highways argument carries any validity. With regard to it being outside the village, yes, it is technically outside the village confines, but the Stratton Neighbourhood Development Plan, which, as most of you know, I was intimately involved with, did allow for development in the adjacent land to that. This is adjacent, so I feel that it does actually meet that requirement and will provide an interesting new building on the site. And because of the way it's designed into the side of the I was going to say hill, but slope is probably a better description, it will cause no lasting, it will cause no blight to the people higher up, and from the further down it will look, as you can see there, like a greenhouse. It also, as the MPPF stipulates, will support the rural economy, which I think is an important aspect. I'm not sure whether it will or won't provide any additional jobs, but it certainly will have an effect on the spending power of people who do work there or bring money into the village. The last point that I'd make is that I suppose technically you could suggest it's a brownfield site, because there are buildings on that site that are, some of them are extant and some are demolished, and the house is planned to be built on the site of existing building footprint. So I'm guessing you could actually say that is a brownfield development. So I think that taking all that into account and the willingness of the applicant to amend his application from the previous one to bring it more in line with the Stratton Neighbourhood Plan, that I would like to propose that we actually accept this application.
Also, thank you, Councillor Frenchman. Do you have a seconder? Okay. Would you like to speak now?
Yeah, I just would like to say, Chair, that again I'm impressed with the fact that the parish council want this. They've got to live there after all. They ought to know, and as far as I'm concerned, this should go ahead pretty much on that basis.
All right. So you're seconding the application. Councillor Longley, you took.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say exactly what Councillor Robertson said, and particularly with the local member. I mean, it seems all the locals can't see anything wrong with it at all. I don't know why we're arguing about it.
Councillor Robertson?
Yes, that application, when it was in front of us last time, had a lot of discussion, and we refused it for a reason, and now we go against what we refused it last time, so I'm a bit confused. And also, villages have their neighbourhood plan, but the decision making reside in DDC. So I can understand. I will have more sympathy, and that is what we were arguing last time, that if it was a running business and successful, but what we see at the moment, it does no validation as a business. I mean, I cannot see that things are produced at the moment, or with greenhouse like that, or sales. So I'm perplexed, but what is for me the point? This application has not overcome the reason why we refused the first time. And that is where I am puzzled.
Thank you, Councillor Reserved. Councillor Wesley. I thought you put your hand up, sorry. Right. Well, you were first, yeah.
Really, just a question. I wonder if the officer could tell us, what is the significance of the fact that there are existing buildings? I mean, not houses, but there are buildings there. Does that affect how we should think about whether this is countryside or whether this is new, or how we look at it?
Do you want to answer that, Pete?
Well, it's been suggested it might be brownfield land, but if it's agricultural land, former agricultural land, then that's excluded from the definition of brownfield. But yes, you can have regard to the fact there are buildings there, which it sounds like is what people are having regard to. And then it's also replacing those buildings on the site compared to other sites that might come forward. I mean, the only thing that I'm sitting here slightly concerned about is if we go back to the picture that we had earlier. Although there's no such thing as precedent in planning, really you can see all along there are very similar plots. So if somebody puts in a proposal to build on there, obviously one of the differences is that there are buildings on this site. And that seems to be one of the things that's been mentioned by Councillor Frenchman has been taken into consideration. So yes is the short answer. Yes, you can take into account the fact that they've got those buildings on the site.
And if I can just add a second question. On that aerial photograph, can it zoom in any further on the site, or is that? I mean, I'm looking.
It's not on there.
It suggests that there is some sort of, that there is a market garden, there is something that happens there. But from the photographs, I don't actually see any evidence of a nursery of any sort. Is that? Can people point it out to me?
Again, I think our view is that, as the gentleman said, hobby. I think basically we had a very similar situation to this in Pittsford Village, where somebody had a nursery that had run down on the edge of the village, and they wanted to have a similar thing. They said, "Oh, I want a house there because I want to carry on the business." There was no agricultural justification. It was on the edge of the village, like this was outside the village confines, off a private track at the back of houses. And we refused that one under delegated powers, and that went to appeal. And the inspector said, well, there's no agricultural case being put forward. And from what I've seen on the site visit as well, the business is run down, and I don't doubt he wouldn't want to live there, but I can't see there's any justification for it. And although you might argue it's more sustainable to live there than keep driving to and from the site, I don't see in this particular instance there's any overriding business case to override policy. So on that basis, I'd say this is very similar really. It looks like it was a former nursery that's very run down now, and there may still be some activity going on there, but I wouldn't think it's any significant kind of business activity, but I could be wrong, but I see what I see on those photographs.
Thank you.
Councillor Frenchman.
I think that.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Aiken first, then Councillor Frenchman, sorry.
It's not so.
I couldn't forget you, Councillor Aiken, I'm sorry.
Well, up to a point, Keith has said part of what I was going to say. They have moved this house forward to what it was last time, but it's still outside the confines of the village. And I am concerned that if we say yes to this, which I don't want to, it's going to open up the door to others to apply, and we might get more. So I'm happy to go along with officers' advice on this.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Frenchman.
Thank you. 2 points I'd make is one is that the difference between this case and the one that the officer mentioned is that Stratton has a neighbourhood plan which clearly says that anything adjacent to the outskirts of the village, it can be made acceptable, and that's what the parish council have taken the view, and I have taken the view that that makes it acceptable. And secondly, we have to view the application that's in front of us, and we've been told many times not to think what the consequences may or may not be for future applications. So, so I think with regards to Councillor Eden, we would have to disregard that, and it's not really relevant. So I think taking the part that the local population are for it, and they're obviously aware of all these possibilities, and those sorts of possibilities are talked about much more at parish council and in villages than they ever are at a planning committee, then I think that that's why I support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, if there's no more, we have a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. 2, 3, 4. Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right, that proposal is lost. I need another proposal now. Councillor Eden?
I propose that we accept officer's advice on this.
Thank you. Councillor Owen-Smith, you second it?
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody wish to speak on that proposal? If not, all those in favour of that proposal to support officer's advice, please show. 5. Those against? 4. The application is refused.
I know. I can say what I like.
Next application is in Watford, and the number is 1051.
Thanks, Chairman. No need for drawings on this one, because it's a retrospective application. That said, members are well aware that you should approach retrospective applications as if it hadn't happened. You judge it on its planning merits, with an open mind, having regard to the development plan and all policies therein. Photographs clearly show the applications for a conservatory, which is a tenant conservatory with an elevated decking area around it. You'll see from neighbour representations that the neighbour most affected is unfortunately unable to attend the committee, but has stated further representations expressing concerns about loss of privacy as a result not only of the conservatory but the activities that would take place in the elevated decking area. The case officer who's been to the site judges the proposal to be acceptable. We do accept there is an impact, that there will be overlooking, but not sufficient as to warrant refusing the application. That particular photograph you've got there is from the affected neighbour. You'll see there's a hedgerow on the right hand side, and then you've got this gap, and that effectively there's a degree of overlooking across a conservatory, which is at a lower level, and then sort of first floor windows that you can see from the other photographs. You see the photograph from inside the conservatory. Yeah, next one. Yeah, that's one. So that's the view from the conservatory looking directly towards the affected neighbour. And you'll see the roof of the conservatory just there, and above it is a bedroom window. So there is considerable difference levels, etc. The applicant would maintain that they can use that garden area in any case, and that there would be mutual overlooking. Concerns of the neighbour, however, are that because the raised decking area is more formalised with outdoor activity, the impact on their amenity is much more significant. It's a balancing exercise. Over to you, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We don't. Oh yes, we do have a speaker. Mrs. O'Donoghue, who's the
Good evening. Just really want to make a point about the privacy issue. The altar's been up for over 3.5 years, and it's never been an issue. I know what's brought on the issue, but I won't go into that. Although the conservatory and the deck look elevated, raised, they are actually just on stilts. The garden slopes, so the view from the veranda or the conservatory is the exact same view you would get from the back door. I can't move the back door. You probably can't see it there, but that is the same level as the shed, the drive. So basically, you walk out the back door onto a slabbed area, and then as you walk down the garden slopes. So we needed a flat area, so it was stilted in order to allow us to put the conservatory and the decking. So we're no higher up than what we are standing at our back door. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Local members, I am one of them, and I will go first because I'm the one out of the three that go to the Watford Parish Council meetings. Clearly Watford Parish Council don't like it, and the objector has written a letter who doesn't like it either. It's difficult for me in the middle because I get on very, very well with the Parish Council. Equally, I've got a head, I hope, for planning. I think what the applicant is saying just there is probably quite right. So my opinion is I support officers' advice. So I'll go to the other member of the planning, along up the ward now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm supportive of this one because one of the reasons I would be supportive is, I think you like to say it's been up for 3 years?
Over 3 years.
Yeah, okay, over 3 years. Well, I would have thought that when it had been first erected, then perhaps we might have had a bit of an argument and come back. And also, I think, where do we go from here? Do we start knocking these sort of things down? I would strongly recommend we went with officers' advice on this.
Are you making this out of proposal?
Oh, I'm pleased to do that, yes.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Councillor Wesley went up first again. He's quick, he's very quick in the bounce. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Wesley?
No, I think it's already been said. I mean, obviously it does have an impact because anything in the back garden is going to have some sort of impact in that sort of environment. Very difficult not to. It's been up for anybody. You have to agree with the levels. You can see that it's at the same level as the back door and the building. It doesn't go up any higher. So the plot is as the plot is, and there's not much you can do about it. And if somebody wants to stand there and look through the hedge, then and down at the other house, then they can, and that's how it is. So I don't really see anything wrong with it. So yeah.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Irving-Swift, then Councillor Frenchman,
Yes,
and Councillor Ritchie.
could you leave that picture, because could we put a condition that there is a fence? Because if you put a fence, closed-board fence, like that, nobody is overlooked and everybody is happy. But I don't know if that can be done, or if that, or more edging, and everybody is happy. I don't know if that could be part of the condition or not. I will leave our officer.
I'm sure an officer will comment on that.
Through you, Chairman, the officers who visited the site have assessed it and don't consider that necessary. If however members feel that that gap between the existing hedge and the other hedge is so significant as to warrant requiring a condition or some form of screening, that's a matter for you as members.
Could I propose, if the proposer and seconder are that in agreement, to put a new bit of hedge? I think we maybe solve the problem for the two neighbours to start talking to each other.
Well, you realise that either of the neighbours, on the one side or the other side, can put a fence up anyway without planning permission. So if the effective one wants to put one up, he can do so. If the one that's doing the effective can put it up as well.
They have listened to what I said.
Yeah.
Through you, Chairman, boundary treatment could be a plant or a hedge, or a fence.
I mean, the gap could be filled in anyway. I mean, we put a 2-metre fence up around the whole yard, and that would solve the issue. Our issue is with regard to the application before you. Our judgment is it's not necessary to have the condition. It's not necessary to have the screen.
I'll ask the proposer, do you consider incorporating boundary treatment?
I would think that looking at the applicants and taking an assessment there, they've listened very carefully to what's been said, and I'd expect them to work on the matter and maybe plant something that would resolve it. And but I don't think it's necessary. I'd take
You can't speak on
Eamon's advice on this. You've studied it, you've thought about it.
Okay, so
I wouldn't change much. I wouldn't change anything. But I'd look to the applicant to be supportive.
right, so the proposal still stands then. So Councillor Frenchman here.
Thank you. Could you go to the previous photograph, please? Is that the next door's garden?
Yeah, that's the next door's garden. It sort of wraps around.
So actually, the privacy from there is much worse.
Well,
Because
yeah.
you can see directly into it, can't you? So it does overlook quite considerably more than the next photo, which is just the gap in the hedge.
Well, I dare say there's mutual overlooking of the gardens between.
But it also strikes me as the photographs that you've taken of the privacy issue from inside the conservatory are exacerbated greatly if the people on the decking are sitting out at the table, which is both a lot nearer and a lot higher. So actually taking just the view from the conservatory is only half the issue, isn't it? So I can't actually accept this at the moment because I think that the privacy issue is actually much greater than these photographs lead you to believe.
Thank you, Councillor Frenchman. Councillor Ritchie.
A few questions. I'd be interested to know just how far this particular construction goes beyond what would have been a permitted development. You know, to what extent does it go further than than would have been allowed without planning permission? I don't agree with Councillor Lumley. I think that if there's an issue, we should not be in a position where we're simply saying to the applicant, we hope you will think about this. If we think it should be done, then we should be putting it in as a condition and saying that it must be done. The other thing that has come up in their discussion is the fact that it has been there for over 3 years. Am I not right in thinking that is completely irrelevant? But been there for 30 years, but we've put up without planning permission. 30 years might be an exaggeration. But if it had been up for a much longer time, then it shouldn't make any difference. If it was put up without planning permission, if we are required to think of the planning application as if it had been made with nothing being there, we should not be influenced by the fact that it is there, and therefore we should not be influenced by the length of time that it is there.
I'm sure the officer will answer it.
Right, in terms of community development, the applicants could erect buildings within their garden without need for planning permission. They could erect means of enclosure around their garden without need for planning permission. They could even deck their garden right up to the boundary with their neighbour and use it as a decked area, provided it didn't exceed 30 centimetres in height without the need for planning permission. So all of those are potential issues. For me, the 3.5 year issue has a degree of relevance in that it is a matter of law that once development is 4 years old, it becomes lawful, becomes immune from enforcement. And I think the point that the members are making is that had this come to the attention of the authority at the time, then the issues would still be the same. But I think it's simply pointing out the fact that there is a time limit on immunity from enforcement, and this particular development is quite close to that. That said, we have approached the application on its planning merits, assessed it and judged it to be acceptable. I take the point from Councillor Frenchman in terms of the mutual overlooking, the overlooking of the garden just to the south there, just below it. There is mutual overlooking from other properties nearby. To my mind, it's no worse than the current situation, particularly in that direction. But in that direction, you have a building-to-building sort of issue, and that's where we have looked at and judged it to be acceptable. And so we've judged it to be acceptable in the other directions. Nothing more, Chairman.
Okay. Right, we have a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Those against? 6-2, so that must be one abstention. Yeah. Thank you. 6-2-1, the application is approved. Next application is in West Alton, and the number is 1149.
The application site lies to the southeast of West Hampton village itself. You see there the roundabout for the West Hampton bypass. The village extends to the northwest. The building immediately to the south has got permission as a nursery and is an established nursery. The buildings to the north were the subject of a previous permission for conversion to business use and included two rectangle areas that you see. Those buildings also form part of that permission. They, however, were never converted. The buildings are subsequently demolished, so it's effectively they've gone. The proposal that's before us is an application for construction of the building to be used as a hair and beauty salon, with treatment rooms, staff areas, and first floor office area. We've consulted our policy colleagues on it. Having regard to the development plan, our view is the proposal conflicts with the development plan. And these types of uses should really be concentrated within existing settlements. It's not a conversion whereby planning policy allows conversion. It's not related to existing businesses on site. It's, as I understand it, a new enterprise. In our view, there's no justification that outweighs the conflict with planning policy. And accordingly, we're recommending the application be refused, Chairman.
Thank you, Aaron. We have a speaker. Mr. Henderson, there's an agent.
Oh, sorry, I'm on further down the line.
Oh,
Yes, that's good.
I beg your pardon, that's the other West Hampton one.
Mrs. Jones.
Mrs. Jones.
You can talk tonight for me.
Yeah, it would help, wouldn't it? I do apologise, Mrs. Jones.
That's all right.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello everybody, my name is Sandy Jones. Thank you for allowing me to speak in support of the planning application for the proposed hair and beauty salon. The slide is available to highlight some of the key points because I've only got 3 minutes. Statements in speech marks are direct quotes from West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy. As already mentioned, 9 years ago the Planning Committee passed the planning application for Rhinos Farm Day Nursery. This was also beyond the confines of West Hampton. Since then, we have weaned, potty trained and educated some 657 children. We have provided local employment, offering full and part-time jobs, as well as supporting local schools and colleges through apprentice schemes and student placements. The nursery is without doubt a much-needed facility for its local community and surrounding areas. 2 years ago, we purchased the derelict site, which nestles between Ryles Farm Day Nursery and Ryles Office Park, and opposite the new housing development of 100 houses. The site has plans for 2 offices. With a great number of offices already established locally in and around West Hampton, it was suggested by our current customers that we offer the community a usable facility. The nursery already caters for 120 families, with 135 children currently on roll. Cars arrive between 8 and 9 a.m, 12, 1 and 2, with pickups at 3 p.m, 4 p.m, and final pickups at between 5 and 6. A steady flow of traffic with an excellent track record. From a survey we carried out with our parents, 100% was in favour of the facility, especially for their children, as some parents travel as far as Western Fable to have their children's haircut. It was unanimous from the survey that this type of facility was favoured over more offices, cutting down on their travel time, as the survey showed that all our customers travelled to either Northampton, Rugby, Market Harborough or Kettering for this type of facility. The private car remains the only realistic transport choice for rural communities, and West Hampton is no exception. Parents and their children would be encouraged through our marketing strategy to use the salon after dropping off,
and it will be part of our service to escort the children with their key workers to have their haircuts. This itself will cut down on traffic movement across the roads. A facility like the Hair and Beauty Salon will not only give local community of West Devon and the surrounding villages a multi-aged, mixed-sex facility, it will also offer employment opportunities to local professionals, but will also look to establish close conditions and academic pathways with local schools through more apprentice schemes and work experiences. Without investment, the growth of rural communities could be forced into becoming commuter dormitories, starved of services and employment opportunities. I hope the committee tonight will invest in the future of West Devon and approve the planning application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Normally now we will go straight to local members, but I'm going to say something first because all councillors get the opportunity to make a comment on planning applications. Well, when this planning application came in, I, as a local member, made a comment, and I made the comment such: I do not support this application. I consider this to be an inappropriate development, no Country 5, and beyond the confines of the village. I made that comment in December. So what I'm saying to you, I made that comment in December as a consultee, the same as other consultees. I don't consider I'm predetermined. I've seen the 151 officer and he doesn't consider that I am. I'm keeping an open mind. I'm not saying anything on the planning application at all until the rest of you have spoken. Okay? So over to local member on the committee first.
Yep. Right, I'm very impressed with the case you just put up, and I know the site extremely well. I know the site detail. I've studied it, and in fact I was at one point contemplating building some of the industrial units you spoke about. Now there are a number of industrial units in it. I'm surprised to see the access is onto the A428 and not back through the industrial units. That's one point I would make, because as we all know, they're both dangerous roads. Well, it's a dangerous road, but the access are fairly close to the roundabout, and as a consequence, the safety aspect isn't the normal aspect you might expect on the A428. Anybody doesn't know it should know that. So I'd be very interested to know what the status was on the original planning, because that would have been 2 more industrial or office blocks as I remember it, and so I would see sooner or later something of that nature would come back. So it's probably a choice between industrial units or office blocks or something as you're suggesting. Now that might be a bit more cars, but of course if the kids have been dropped off and they go into that's not bad. So I fail to see any reason not to do it. That would be my view, because it's, I mean, you see the site's pretty scruffy, that bit of the site. One point that I would go perhaps against it, there are a couple of beauty salons in West Haddon already. I don't use them myself, but you know.
That's obvious.
Thank you. So anyway, I fail to see a reason to say no. So I would be supportive of this application.
Is that a proposal?
Not at this stage. I'd like to see hear what else is said.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Miller, you're a local member, you wish to speak.
Yes, very much indeed, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak as a local member for the Long Buckley Ward, which includes West Haddon. I'd like to speak in support of this application, Chairman. I think it's as you can see now, the site's currently derelict. They had permission before, I believe, on this site for 2 office blocks. I think one's already been built already that's actually operational. I've been to the site, I had a look at the site, I know the road. There's a possibility of another exit onto the bypass, Chairman. There's another route round from that site to the actual bypass. I'm not sure that's an option that's been looked at. But I support the application because I actually support businesses in rural areas. And it's not about the type of business. We can have office blocks as many as you want. But the key thing to think here is it's a service for the area. It's a very rural area. There's a lot of people live in this area over a wide expanse. And I think this type of facility, if it's well run, and if it's run like the nursery's run, I think it will be well run, that actually will attract a lot of people to it. And I think that can only be good news for the rural areas as more and more houses get built in West Haddon and other areas. So I actually support this application, Chairman. I understand when I read the report, I thought the report was very 50-50 about which way it might end up in terms of a recommendation. So I think it is a sort of one of those things you either support or don't support on fairly minimal grounds, I think, between the two sides. So on my side, I actually support it for the benefits of the rural economy, and also I think it will be well run. And I do believe actually the highways issue can be resolved where you can make it, you know, safe. I think Councillor Longley said that in a sense, near the roundabout. It's not the same as though it's a long stretch of road which is very, very fast. So that's my view. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Robson?
Thank you, Chair. As members know, and as I declared earlier, I actually live in West Haddon, and not only that, but I'm on the parish council in West Haddon, and they have discussed this, as you might imagine, and as far as I'm aware, they're not particularly against it, simply because it's a mess as it is. There's not much you can do other than develop it. And although I was rather surprised that it was going to be considered as a beauty salon, I couldn't understand that at all. Now it's been explained to me. I'm actually in favour of this development, and I'd like to propose that we actually go against officers' advice and approve it.
Thank you. Did you want a seconder?
Yeah, in that case, I would be happy to follow.
Okay.
Chair, we need a reason.
You need a reason for approving it.
Well, effectively a brownfield site, but this is I actually don't know. I need advice on that, because what do you do with a thing like this?
The advice is not too formidable, so you've got to find one.
Chairman, can I just come back? I mean, there seems to be a suggestion that because the planning permission existed for 2 office buildings, that it's okay to build on this and it's brownfield land. The permission that existed was for conversion of buildings. Those buildings are no longer there.
Okay.
I accept that it's a material consideration, but those buildings have gone. The policies allow for conversion of buildings. They also allow for small-scale development associated with existing businesses. This is a completely new enterprise, not linked to the existing complex.
I thought it had just been explained that it was linked to the existing.
It's linked to the nursery. It's not linked to the enterprise upon which the previous planning permission existed.
Oh, that's true.
And that previous planning permission existed with access straight onto the with the bypass. That's why you will access onto the A4280, because the access will be shared with the nursery.
Ah, I see. Yeah, so there's.
So I just want to clarify that. Clearly, so that there may be a bit of a grey area as to whether it's brownfield land or not brownfield land, because the previous historical use was as agriculture, keeping the chickens. One might argue that because part implementation of the conversions of the 2 other buildings, that's changed. So I just wanted to make that clear, that the permission that existed was conversion of existing buildings that they've gone. Okay.
Okay. Councillor Irving-Swift.
Yes, the summary said planning permission is sought for a sizable low-rise building within open countryside. And that is where we have a problem. Is it in our policy or outside our policy? It's not a 50-50 for me. We are in or out. I know we have a nursery, and I can feel the passion of the other person. But if we accept that side, we'll be saying we have to accept the other side in open countryside willy-nilly, because there is a precedent, and that is my only problem. Do we set a precedent or don't we? Thank you. Can the officer...
I'll ask the officer in a minute. First of all, I need a reason for the proposal.
I mean, if I can assist, because I understand from members, you seem to be suggesting that because the site has had a previous permission for offices, albeit conversion, the fact that permission exists weighs in favour of the development of the site. That seems to be the suggestion. That said, members should also be aware of the advice of the Highway Authority that should you be minded to approve the application. And again, we can come on to discussing conditions. But they have quite specific requirements, including the need to provide a right turning lane and construct a footpath link up to the new housing estate that's been referred to, which itself provided a footpath link back into the village. So that in order to promote a wider choice of alternative modes of transport to the site, including walking, cycling, etc., not just a private car, those are considerations members will have to give some thought to. But it seems to me that you seem to be giving a lot of weight to the planning history of the site upon which the building is proposed.
Well, thank you for your help there, through the Chair. Eamon, but,
Do you want a bit longer to think about it?
No, I just wanted to point out that the place, even though the buildings have now been demolished, and it did have planning permission previously, it's still a mess, and we're looking for gain here, basically. And what are you going to do? Just leave it to collapse?
So what's your reason? Do you think there's a planning gain?
Well, I think there's a planning gain there. Is that a sufficient
Well, it seems to me that what you're suggesting is the social, economic, environmental benefits of this way in favour of the proposal.
Okay, Councillor Eden, then Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I can't go to approve this. I need to go with officers. Looking at the reasons at the end, we're going to be going against quite a few of our policies. One's from West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy, one's from Daventry Local Plan Policies, and even the West Haddon Neighbourhood Development Plan. I can't do that, so I'm afraid I'm an officer's advice.
Thank you.
It's no good us having things if we're going to change them all the time.
Councillor Wesley. Councillor Wesley. I do apologise. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly concerned at this idea that if the place is a bit of a mess, it will be better having a building on it. We have got messes all over the countryside, and yet we don't suggest that the answer to the problem is everywhere there's a mess, construct a beauty salon. I'm slightly puzzled too at the relationship between a hairdresser beauty salon and what do you call it, a nursery or preschool. To me, the two things, they may be linked by the same personnel or by the same staff or by the same management. But it strikes me that these are two things that are quite different. And that if we were faced with an application, somebody wanting to build a beauty salon in the middle of a field, of course we would say no. And I don't see what the difference ought to be here. We've been told that some people take their children to Western Level or elsewhere for getting their haircuts. There is no need for that. There is surely a hairdresser, if not in West Haddon, certainly in Longbuckby, and if not that far from Daventry, which is full of them. I just feel that there's a lot, there are a lot of sort of hairs that people seem to be chasing around here. But to me, this essentially is building a new facility in a place where it should not be. If it can be built in somewhere inside the village of West Haddon, fine. But this strikes me as something that is in the wrong place.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley next.
Thank you, Chair. For me, this does seem to go against a lot of our policies, but it all sort of sits around them, and they're not totally clear. Open countryside. It's not really open countryside in reality, is it? And it's like the use of the buildings, and sustainability questions. I mean, yeah, okay. Obviously, a nursery and hairdressers aren't intrinsically linked, but people that go to nurseries also use hairdressers and other facilities, and I can actually see a real case here for stopping people driving around the countryside and doing two hits in one. It actually saves people time, it saves people energy, it saves car journeys. It is a rural business, and that can only help that rural community. And I think it's a really good and open presentation, because when I was looking at it, I thought, can you actually say that? And actually, you came along tonight and actually showed us in a little bit more detail how that would work. I think it seems like a really good idea. yeah, we shouldn't just build things on a messy site. I really don't agree with that either. But the fact remains is there were buildings there. It's not as if if they were still there, they'd still be there and we'd still be looking at them. I don't see anything wrong with it, and I think we should probably support this application.
Thank you. Councillor, yeah, Frenchman, you're on there.
Thank you. Just on a note, there is a hairdresser in Spratt.
Just
I just like to mention that.
Harry Frenchman.
Very Frenchman, that's right, yeah.
5% discount for fellow councillors.
I can give 10.
And Market Arbor.
Yeah. I was very much for this, but then having listened to officers and Eamon's explanation of the planning permission and the conversion rather than the building of offices, I think I've swung round. I'm very much with Councillor Eden now, and I think this is a very, very large building, and I don't know what the footprint of the other buildings was, but you know, it's 30 odd metres long, which is 100 feet, and that is just enormous. It seems very, very big to me for a hairdresser's, and we talk about open countryside, but it does affect the views in open countryside. You can see it's an isolated spot. I think the cost of having a right turn lane put in, as the highways want, and a side pavement built so people can walk into town, will also be prohibitively expensive. I think that those costs probably haven't been taken into account when this was looked at. So I can't really bring myself to go against officers' advice.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to have my say now because we're coming towards the end of the debate. I've listened to all what's been said, and I still have the same opinion that I believe it should be refused. I believe it's definitely an open countryside. It has no footpath link to it from the village whatsoever. It has no street lighting from the village whatsoever. Nobody could actually walk to it without walking across grass or on the main road. You've got to drive to it. Originally, when the original application for the nursery came to planning application, it was recommended for refusal because of being in open countryside, and members reversed it then. So, as a local member, and it just goes to show, by the way, members of the public, that we don't get together beforehand and discuss how we're going to vote this, because you've got 3 local members with different opinions. And we won't fall out about it either, whichever way it goes. So, I support officers' advice very, very strongly. I think we have one more speaker, which was Councillor Robertson, which you were the proposer, I think, originally.
Yeah, indeed, Chair, thank you. I just want to add 1 or 2 things. We started talking about the commercial viability of it. I don't think it's much business of ours. The applicants must have put some market research effort into this. So I wouldn't go along with any of the talk of it not being commercially viable. I think that's entirely up to the applicants. Now, when it comes to road safety, I personally would not object to the conditions that highways have suggested, although they seem a little onerous, being inserted, or at least some provision made for road safety, some better provision. They just seem a little over the top, really. Now, the picture we've got up now, if you just hold it there, or go back out a little bit, you've got Talkington Farm. Now that, in fact, is commercial development. It's not a farm development. It looks like it might be, but it isn't. It's called a farm. It's not a farm.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal, the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3. Those against? 6. Right, that proposition is lost. I need another proposition. Evan this time, yes.
I propose that we follow officers' advice.
Councillor Patron?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Anybody wish to speak on it? You don't know, but if you're deaf, you get a sign when your hearing aid battery's gone, and you just go. We have a proposal. The application be refused as per officers' advice, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 3. The application is refused for the given reasons. Next application, 2 is in West Haven, and the number is 1261.
Thanks, Chairman.
Yes, he's got a relative that works there.
Thanks, Chairman. Just before I start, there's a typo at the end of the report. You'll see that the advice is to approve the application according to the condition to be amended to delete plots 15 and 17. And then what I've typed out the condition where I've included plots 15 and 17. So take those out if you're minded to agree the advice. Since the production of late representations, I'm aware that a further letter has been circulated to members from the property at members the property at 64 Dillsborough Road. I should point out we actually directly notified adjoining properties, including 64 and 66 Dillsborough Road, and received no representations from them in the course of the application. So it's a rather belated set of representations. That said, that doesn't mean that you can't give full consideration to those in your assessment of the application. As far as officers are concerned, yeah, there was a condition imposed at reserved matter stage because of this particular house type. These properties backed onto the existing properties on Gillsborough Road. There was a need to impose a condition to provide control over the types of windows, etc., that potentially overlooked existing gardens. We all accept new residential development is always going to have an impact. In looking at the reserved matters, we have determined the application according to our own standards. So garden lengths, elevations, etc., are all in accordance with standards, and that's what's happened here. The development accords fully with the standards we had at the time. That said, the condition was quite clear in identifying those plots where obscure glazing would be required. And for all the other plots that are mentioned in the original condition, obscure glazing has been applied to the window in question, with the exception of plots 15 and 17. Now this was brought to the attention of the District Council some time ago during the course of construction. And despite what the Parish Council said, it was actively investigated by officers, and officers were quite active in their discussions, both with the developers, but also keeping the Parish Council and neighbours informed. Yes, it's taken a little while for the applications to be submitted, but they have been submitted. The properties are now privately occupied. Irrespective of that, you again have to approach this as if it didn't happen, judging it on its planning merits and having regard to development plan policy and guidance that we have. The adopted guidance that's relevant, directly relevant to this, because it's the only guidance that we have that mentions habitable rooms or seeks to define habitable rooms and distances between properties, is the SPG on designing house extensions. And it talks about 22 metres between main elevation to main elevation. And it also seeks to sort of define habitable rooms as bedrooms, etc., but not bathrooms or circulation spaces, etc. Turning to these two particular plots, and I've been both into the properties concerned, i.e. the properties where the windows are, and I've been to both 64 and 66 Gillsborough Road. I can understand the concerns of the existing neighbours in that they are looking at a clear glass window And from them there's a perception of overlooking, but the reality is nothing like that. And even if there were, applying our own guidance, the distances involved are so far within our existing standards as to be, abundantly acceptable using our own standards in terms of space about dwellings and distances between properties. So whilst I have sympathy, a degree of sympathy with the occupants of the neighbouring properties, based on the merits of the proposals and based on my visit to the site, I consider the application to be acceptable and the condition to be amended to remove the requirement for obscure glazing on this particular landing window, Chairman. And without that, no further comments, sir?
Thank you, Eamon. We do have a speaker, the correct one this time. Sorry about last time, Mr. Anderson. The agent you are for the applicant.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application which is recommended for approval. My name is Richard Henderson and I'm a planning manager at Davidson's. Davidson's have worked with officers of the council and have liaised with the property owners to seek retention of the clear glazing on the landing windows, which provide natural light to the full height void area which serves the sitting and kitchen room area below and provides natural light to the central stair area. As you see from the photos that were shown earlier, the landing area does have a balustrade for safety purposes and is set back 2 metres from the window, with the kitchen and sitting area visible below. The void area effectively means that the property owners cannot access the window other than when undertaking any routine internal maintenance which would require the use of a ladder from the kitchen area below to access the window above. None of the other windows on the first floor rear elevation are obscure glazed, with these windows serving bedrooms. As set out in the report, both the properties meet and exceed the relevant policies and guidance, and as such do not cause overlooking that would result in loss of privacy to the adjoining existing neighbours and are respectful of residential amenity generally. Davidson's respectfully request your support for the approval of this application, which is respectful of amenity to the owners and the adjoining residents alike. Thank you.
Right, local members, Councillor Longley, and then I'm aware that Councillor Miller wants to speak. Who wants to go first?
I'm very happy to defer to you, Councillor Miller.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Longley.
Yeah.
I've been asked to make a representation tonight, Chairman, on behalf of the Parish Council, which I think Eamon's alluded to. I did pass on their comments to Eamon McDowell, because they were very concerned actually about why law enforcement officers did not take action when first notified of the breaches of planning. Why was the initial planning application requesting an amendment to the planning conditions removed while the houses were sold and then occupied? And if these breaches are allowed, and clearly they are identified some considerable time before this, it makes a mockery of the planning system and sets a precedent for all planning applications regardless of the size of the development. So the Parish Council asked me to bring that to your attention tonight, Chairman, on behalf of them. I had another representation made by a resident, I think it's been one of the houses actually where these windows overlook. In fact, this resident's saying of the 15 new first-storey windows now look into our garden. So he's saying this development has these big windows looking into his garden. He has objections to removal condition 6 as follows. We can see clear glass landing windows to the bathroom and into the master bedrooms. And obviously I'm not sure the applicant's saying that it's quite a long way away. I was going to say actually, Chairman, especially on the last application West Haddon, the old site visits were very helpful for members of the planning committee, because when you go to a site visit, you see for real what's on the land. And on that last application, I felt we didn't get a true picture of what's there. This might be a similar situation where you don't really know, unless you're actually there looking at it, what the real impact is. All I'm doing is doing what I've been asked to do, is make a representation to the committee tonight from this gentleman who's concerned about the removal of condition 6, and that's what I'm doing as a local member. Davison stated people not stand at the landing windows, and as such it's not a problem. On the contrary, he says, the windows are in a high traffic area, and due to the layout of the house, people will walk towards the window from multiple rooms, including the main bathroom. As a direct result, the imposing number of windows on the new development We have planted trees, etc. That doesn't really matter. He's planted trees to try and screen it. Retaining the conditions should have negligible effect on plots 15 and 17, with the obscure windows still providing light into the kitchen dining area as they were designed to do. The view from the windows largely is the back garden of the next council semi-detached house, which I know that's on West Haddon Road. This minor condition seems an appropriate way to mitigate significant privacy problems associated with a full-length window without coverings. I'm just reading it out on behalf of a resident who's asked me to present that to tonight's committee chairman. That's all I wish to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Right, the next local member is Councillor Longley.
Yeah, I'm torn on this one because I'm always irritated when you get a development that has a planning condition on, which then subsequently gets an attempt to reverse it. And I wouldn't have thought the financial implications were probably worth the effort from a developer's point of view. But so, on the one hand, I'd say that I think we should stick with the planning conditions that were on initially. On the other hand, I'm very conscious of the technical arguments that were put forward by the officer in McDowell. Very good. So I'm torn on the subject here. I could go either way on this one. So I'm going to listen to the rest of the debate and then form my conclusions then.
Okay, well, as the third local member, it's not we often get three of them. I certainly took the view of the parish council, the same as Councillor Miller did. But after being informed about the distances and everything, I'm a lot more satisfied now that the application is not as bad as is feared by the parish council. I must also tell you that this is a major application we're deciding on. This is one that counts score-wise. That doesn't mean to say you've got to approve it, but it means it must be done, as always, properly and correctly, because it is a major. The next person I have on the list is Councillor Frenchman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just gobsmacked of why this happened. If all the other houses had obscured glass, why these two particular ones didn't? And I don't know whether we have any explanation of that. And I think as Councillor, Councillor Longley alluded to, why wasn't this just sorted out? It was cheaper and quicker and easier to put obscure glass in than to go through a whole planning application. And that annoys me more than anything, I have to say.
I could ask the applicant for a quick 10-word answer. Could you give us a quick answer on that?
I think I could give it as well.
Chairman, ours is not the reason why. Ours is to deal with this application before you, based on its merits. The purpose of the condition is to afford the council the ability to control or to assess any changes from that. And that's exactly what you're having here. All the other plots, which on this section drawing here, plots 20 and 21 are similar house types. They've got the obscure glazing, and I would accept if that was the case here. And I think, to be fair to the previous case officer, he pursued Davison's on this to ensure that they were obscure glazed because they hadn't been at the time. I think it's just one of those situations where it arose for whatever reason on the site. The clear glass was put in instead of obscure glass. We were made aware of it. We pursued Davison's, we went to the site, and we secured the compliance with the condition of two of the plots. And the two subject plots, looking at it, we simply judged it not to be a breach that was worthy of taking enforcement action, but it required regularisation, and that's why we're here. Applying our own standards, applying our own adopted standards and guidance.
Okay.
I'm still hazy as to that explanation because to my mind you have a condition that should be fulfilled and a willful, if that's what it is, disregard of that is really going against everything that we as a planning committee have suggested they should do, and that gives us a bad reputation and gives other developers the opportunity to say, oh, they got away with it, we can get away with it.
Yeah, I hear what you say, but no.
So I can't bring myself to approve this.
I mean, the chairman was going to offer the applicant the opportunity to come back. That's what I say. All I can say is the application is before you, is judged, has been assessed, all its planning merits. We have to come to it afresh, and we've assessed it, we've judged it to be acceptable. We can't question the motives or otherwise, we're looking at it on purely on its planning merits.
Human nature.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Robinson.
Well, Chair, I was only going to say that no matter what I say about this, basically I'm going to be damned. But this is obvious to me. The Davidsons are actually trying to put right a mistake that occurred prior to them selling the properties. They've now sold the properties and therefore cannot do this work, this extremely cheap work, as you point out, without the occupants, without the owner, now owner's permission. And if they're refusing, which I assume they are, I assume they've been asked, then this is going to be a nightmare of enforcement. I don't see how it can be clearly enforced.
Well, through you, Chairman, actually, so the planning permission goes with the ownership of the property. So if these two properties that have the clear glass had actually caused a problem, then the council, if it was appropriate, could enforce against the house owners. That isn't the case. I mean, really, if you're looking at it like this now, we are where we are, but actually it was probably, for those two properties, not reasonable to impose that glazing in the first place. Now we know what we know.
And again, Chairman, through you, should only pursue formal enforcement as a last resort. Again, the approach has to be judging it against, in a proportionate manner and a reasonable manner, but judging it and having regard to your own development plan policies, etc. And in this case, it's so clearly in compliance with policy that enforcement, in respect of these two particular properties, I don't know, I would be advising against, but that's But I do have sympathy.
But you look at the time scale. This could have been put right in an afternoon 6 months ago for no cost, or literally no cost, and therefore I don't understand why it's come to us.
But through you, Chairman, actually, if somebody now owns that home and they say, well, I'm happy with the clear glass, and I don't see any reason why it should be changed, then you have a number of parties to satisfy. So it's not necessarily the case.
Anyway, well, next speaker is Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair.
Followed by Councillor Ritchie.
I just feel that we're being pushed a little bit towards this because, you've heard about the nightmare of enforcement and the fact that it now somehow complies with our standards, which I understand it does, looking at the diagrams. But surely, when this condition was put in, it's now. Why was it not flagged up that was the case when the condition was actually imposed? Because surely nothing has changed since then, has it? Since the original application, and it went in there for a reason, whether it was against policy or otherwise, and that was how it was agreed at the planning committee. So you can argue all you like, saying that that's the layout of the house, etc. I sort of understand that, but it's still a Bradley window in the back of on the back of that house, overlooking somebody else's house, and it should have been sorted out before. And it's not the neighbour's fault that it wasn't sorted out before. The developer should have gone on it, and the fact remains the condition was there. They knew the condition was there, and they should have complied with it. And if they didn't comply with it, it should have come back beforehand and been sorted out.
Okay, the next speaker is Councillor Ritchie.
I can be brief because others have said so much. This thing just makes me very angry. Clearly, Davidson's knew what the condition was. It's reported it had been pointed out to them when they could have made the changes that they had got clear glass where it should have been powdered grass. I just don't see how we can possibly say that, look, let's accept that it is done. Let's accept that perhaps that because of our conditions this is fine. We're just making fools of ourselves in front of of developers if we allow them to ride roughshod over the conditions that we lay down. Now, what makes me angry is the idea that perhaps there are difficulties in constructing an argument for refusing this application. But I do think that, you know, if we can't find an argument for refusing this, I just wonder sometimes just why we spend so much time discussing conditions if we aren't going to make sure that they actually happen.
It's not uncommon for somebody to vary conditions
Chair, this is not varying conditions. This is a conditions being ignored.
Yeah. No.
Chairman, can I come back to you?
Let the officer come back.
I mean, as I say, we can argue the whys and wherefores, the cars come on, the applications to be submitted. Now, my understanding of the lead up to the application, and as I've already said, the officer concerned had gone on site and had assessed it and judged plots 21 and 20 and 21 to be unacceptable, which is why he pursued obscure glazing. In his conversations with the applicants, he identified plots 15 and 17 to be acceptable and suggested a way forward was the submission of an application to regularise that. So what I would say to you is that the officers of the council at the time, having regard to all the advice on enforcement and working with applicants in a proportionate manner, suggested that the best way forward of regularising this breach, based on its planning merits, was to make the application for 15 and 17, but the obscure glazing, the requirements and conditions should still apply in plots 20 and 21. If you judge it to be unacceptable, then what you're doing is suggesting that, for whatever reason, this proposal breaches your own policies, then fine. But to simply say that because the conditions breached, it's unacceptable in planning terms, is not a way forward. I understand, have every sympathy with your cynical view that builders are just riding roughshod over the planning system. But the fact remains is that they've submitted an application to regularise the situation, and that application is judged to be acceptable on planning grounds. So the whole issues of motives, of developers being deliberately ignoring the planning system, frankly, is irrelevant. You have to judge the application on its planning merits.
Okay. I've got three speakers now with another finger up. First of all, Councillor Irving Swift, then Councillor Etten, and then Councillor Longley.
I will come. What is the harm? You know, it's a circulation, and as we all can be upset when conditions are not adhered to. But frankly, you have two bedrooms on each side. They don't have glazing, obscure glazing, so they overlooked by nature. This one, they can't go too close to the window, it's a void. So they are 1 meter 50, 2 meters away from the window. So what is the harm, or what would have been really the benefit of the obscure windows? Because from both, on each side, on each side of that window, you have bedrooms, so people can overlook the other things. So I am a bit puzzled in one way why it was obscure at that point. I know it's a bit bigger window, but frankly, when you look at the passageway, do people stand there and stare? I think that big window was more to put light at the bottom. So I think I will go with officer advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Etten.
Thank you, Chairman. I partly admit that they should have been the right glass to start with, but I can't see any sense in changing at the moment. Both these houses are sold, people are living in them. They must be happy with the glass as it is. Otherwise, although there's a void there, there's nothing to stop anybody putting curtains up or a blind, which can be done from downstairs. They seem quite happy with them. And I must admit, the other picture that we've seen showing these from the outside, from somebody else's garden, you'd need a pair of binoculars to see through that window and see somebody walking from one room to another. If the people that have bought the houses are happy as they are, I don't see any reason why we should do anything about it. Plus the fact they could stop us going in anyway. Don't they say an Englishman's home is his castle? Can't get in.
Well, I live in a village where opposite my house, to one side, I can see straight in the bedroom windows of the house opposite. And the same is up over High Street, all the street in my village. And it's always been like that. Anyway, Councillor Longley, you're next.
Yeah, shame on you, Jim. Yeah, as I said, I've listened to the debate, very carefully, very good, and my conclusion is that we should take the emotion out of this and take the technical, very capable technical advice of the officer, and I would like to propose that we accept officer's advice.
Thank you. Do you have a second? You do have a second, yeah? Councillor Irving Swift. Does anybody else wish to speak? If not, we've got a proposal the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Those against?
1, 2,
Abstain.
3.
Okay, the application is approved. The next is a report of the TPO order, which will wait till our councillors sit down. Okay.
Church Brampton, Golf Lane, Church Brampton, for those who know it, is a very distinctive area, characterised by large dwellings set in large plots, but also lots of trees, and consequently those trees do have quite a large amenity value in that location. So we've seen the report there that there's been some concern about the longevity of the trees, should we say, from various threats, in inverted commas, about people thinking about development or various other things. So we've decided that we would rather retain control by putting a preservation order on them. But I would just say that it doesn't mean people can't do work to the trees or they can't do things to them or alter them in any way. It just means we have control and they have to get our permission, and that's really the point I want to get across really. We're starting from a position of having the trees retained and having that control over what happens to the trees. That's really what this is about. Not saying they can never be taken out or cut down or branches cut off or altered in any way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have a speaker, Mr. Green, who's waited patiently all night.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I use a pointer? I promise not to take anybody's eye out.
Yes.
Thank you.
You at Brampton wouldn't do that.
No. My name's Robin Green. I've been lived opposite the residents at Everglades for the last 20 odd years. We moved there in 1983 and they were there when we arrived. Could you put the plan up for the TPOs, please? So, so we have no objection to the TPOs that you're suggesting at the front of the house, at the front of the property, but the ones that go along the side and at the back. So those are predominantly, there's 46 predominantly Leylandii trees that go at the side at the back of the property. I'm representing Dr. Donald Senior, who has got Alzheimer's disease, his wife Carol, who's recovering from cancer and a broken head, and his junior daughter Elizabeth, who's with me tonight. So what we're looking at basically is that we haven't got a problem with the TPOs at the front. We're actually looking at, let's see if we can get that to work, the TPOs that you're suggesting down the side there, particularly when you haven't put TPOs on any of these trees here when the Rosebank development was done. I'm going to show you a picture in a minute for a row of trees down there that were 40-foot high Leylandii from there, where we had complaints from here that they were blocking views and sunsets. And I'm going to use Google Earth, which if your machine brings up Google Earth, we can bring up 1, 2 things.
We can do anything, sir.
That's all right. So
Time for the training.
that's why I'm cracking on. So over the years, there's been a number of disputes and regarding screens going to the height of 40 to 50 foot in close proximity to boundary hedges. And the leylandii grows spindly, and can we have slide 1 please? Grows spindly and are prone to bend and snap in high winds. And there's upwards, no, that's 3. That's the one, yeah. So if you look at this, mind your eyes, see that galaxy there? You can see how boundary leylandii grow out and then they go all the way down. They took 20 foot off the top of those, but the ones down there were an insect of 40 foot. So just to conclude, Althorpe don't like leylandii. I feel there's no consistency in Daventry district policy on TPOs. Cardoza's house was actually built with leylandii fronting on it, and before the ink was dry, they actually took the trees down. Rosebank, I actually showed you where they actually removed the trees on the boundary. And one important point, I would like to remind you of the case of Perrin versus Northampton with regard to TPOs, because the council have become liable to the damage caused by the trees that were covered by a TPO. So the leylandii have been a fire risk. We're not objecting to the ones at the front, but leylandii are a fast-growing native tree infected by aphids, cause problems to residents and undue stress. And what we're looking for is a compromise solution, that you actually look at the TPOs at the front in one bit, and then look at the leylandii, which is basically a glorified weed and not a native tree. Althorpe don't like them, and view those in there as a separate item. Thank you. Sorry to run over.
No, that's all right. That was a good 3 minutes. I'll go straight to the local member. Yes,
I just realised it's me. I'm no tree expert, so I've always deferred to what Michael Benton has said on these matters, because he's proved over the years to be a very competent and reasonable arbiter of what is good and what is not. Having read the report, it appears to me that there is a mixture of trees in there. And I have to say that if Michael Benton is happy with that as a group and as a TPO, then I have no expertise to say other than I accept what he says, and I will go with the TPO as existing.
I will say one thing. I used to be Brampton's county councillor, and this gentleman that's here was a parish councillor, and we had many happy years. It's a very good, as you know, parish council.
Point of order, Chair. Shouldn't have you expressed an interest in that case?
No, it's already been declared. You don't have to declare. You used to be a county councillor for that area.
Your knowledge of the applicant.
It was declared 11 years ago, and 10 and 9 and 8. Anyway, he's a very sensible member of the parish council, which I'm sure you're aware. They're a very efficient parish council. And all I hear him saying is, look, keep the good stuff and get rid of the rubbish, which is leylandii, which is rubbish. And if that is at all possible, I would agree with what he's saying. Councillor Wingsworth.
Well, I was the same, because leylandii, and I have some at one of the hedge of one by one, and they are okay, because people cannot top them, and it costs a lot of money, and suddenly you have those monsters. I thought, is that normal that we TPO leylandii? Because as far as I'm concerned, they are weed, and if they are more than a certain amount, you can ask them to be cut.
The first time we've done it.
Any more comments?
Yeah, I can't believe it put TPOs on my own. It just seems bizarre to me.
Through you, Chairman, the pages 70, bottom of 70 and top of page 71, there are a couple of paragraphs explaining that there are various types of conifers in a group. So, and as pointed out at the beginning, having that group protection does not necessarily mean that every single tree in that is protected forever. It just means that there is an element of control.
But that control means they have to get permission to cut a land down, doesn't it, or to trim it?
Indeed.
Which is.
Sorry, I was just going to say the very same thing. You're imposing something on people that's just a pointless exercise, and it's costing them money, it costs them hassle to actually come back and get permission to do that on what is nothing special. Yeah, there's a group of trees, and surely we can say apart from the species, surely we can say apart from the species Leylandii, can't we? I mean, that's the point.
We'll ask the officers if that can be done. Officers, could we?
I think you need to defer this report, to be honest, Chairman, because I'm not an expert on trees. All I can say is what Councillor Frenchman said. The council tree officer has looked at these, he's considered, he's seen that as a very long report, he's considered all the arguments he's got on, 3 paragraphs about the Leylandii, answered all the points that have been made by the objectors, including one of the blue cedar, which is another conifer, can't be included because it's suffered damage. And I have to go with Michael and what Councillor Frenchman said, that if Michael, our tree expert, says that's what I'm recommending, then we're going to disagree. But if you want me to ask questions, we need to ask them of Michael, to be honest. I can't answer the question.
Over to you, committee. What do you want to do? You either make a decision now or defer it. Councillor Frenchman?
I would like to propose we accept off the report, please.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Edmund. Right, if nobody else wishes to speak on it, all those in favour of that resolution, please show.
1, 2, 3.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
Right. So
that's
I need another I need something else now.
or different.
Can we propose that we defer it?
You can either propose deferral or you could. Could they propose to leave out the Leylandii?
So what?
We recommend that we would go back.
Defer.
We need to go back to the technical
Okay.
section.
I think we need to go back to Michael for the technical argument.
So you're happy to propose deferral?
Pending advice.
Can you get a seconder for that? Right. All those in favour for deferral, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Right, that's it.
Would it come to the committee meeting?
It'll come back to the committee.
No, will Michael
We'll
come?
bring it back to committee.
Maybe, yes, because obviously we'll be the same page again.
Okay, you're part way there.
We suggested a compromise to actually,
Well,
to actually say get rid of the group down the line, but if you want to go to Michael.
yeah, we know what you want, you're part way there. Okay? That concludes the meeting. Thank you.